I'm Chris Schnee, and I write science fiction and fantasy. I also do tabletop role-playing games. I run various campaigns for other people, and I've done solo games by myself where I'm the only player but also the GM, and I write up what happens as a story. This is an example of one of those. I'm running a session of the game Worlds Without Number by Kevin Crawford, as a single player with 2 characters. This setting is called Aeres, part of a book called The Chronicles of Aeres by Dueling Dragon Adventures. This is a high fantasy setting that is recovering from a recent magic catastrophe involving a mad king. It was written for D&D 5th edition originally, so I'm winging it in terms of adaptation. Half the reason I'm doing this is an experiment in seeing how well I can adapt the thing. My characters are both 3rd level, after a set of adventures centered around Padfoot Alley, an underground village of rat people. The alley is right beneath the region's still devastated capital city, called Taldorius. The alley's existence is well known, though. Here's a view of their character sheets. We have Emmer, a male warrior with sword and armor, currently working as a guard, and Len, a female mage with elemental magic. Both of them are former humans who come from the same village. They saw something they shouldn't, and they agreed to a thorough witness protection program that involved a magic change of species. When the storyline begins, the heroes are hanging around in Padfoot Alley. Emmer is working as a guard, and Len is using her stone-shaping magic to expand the tunnel network. Very useful to them. They're popular lately, but they're short on money, so they take a job outside. They're hired to go kill an Etin, a 2-headed giant that's been menacing the village of Kettlesare. Getting there means going on a 50-mile trek through plains. The good news, this is a well-traveled route. Bad news, it passes through their hometown of Beardle Crossing, the same place they fled. They're not eager to deal with the bandit gang that took the place over until they're a little more confident, i.e. higher level, so they detour somewhat, making for a tougher trip. They do each have a little wilderness survival experience, and they know the area. Estimated travel time is around 2 days, loaded with food and water. I rolled for encounters each day and night, one day treated as having heavy banditry in the area, but they made it safely through the roads and wilds to their destination. The town of Kettlesare is a farming community on the edge of good land with a devastated zone to the north and east. Emmer and Len aren't welcome to the north anyway, where non-humans and magic users are frequently captured due to the last king's lingering influence. The local noble family here in Kettlesare is willing enough to hire muscle. The party stops by that town to gather information about this monster they're hunting, said to be raiding a hamlet to the west in the woods. This turns into a survival test to try tracking this thing, and they do a terrible job of tracking, so the Etin finds them first. I was thinking about how to model this thing in game terms, and I picked the stat sheet for the Hulk Anak, basically a giant orc or ogre. I rolled for initiative, and it was actually a tie, so I gave it to the ogre, the Etin. And then I rolled for what the range could possibly be, and treated it as a nighttime encounter, even though it should be day, because it's kind of by surprise. And what was the distance where they encounter this thing? 20 feet away. They're trying to track this thing, and it sneaks up on them and practically taps them on the shoulder. It roars, and it starts attacking. It roars and tries to smash Len, the squishy wizard girl, with his giant club. However, Emmer has the ability called Valiant Defender, which is a special focus ability in the WWN rules that makes him really good at guarding other people. His usual tactic is to stay close to Len and make sure that any blows fall on him rather than her. He's got much better armor and more hit points. The result is that the hit is redirected, and Emmer barely shoves Len out of the way and avoids getting smashed with a big club. However, due to the way I portrayed that, Len is too jostled to be able to cast a proper spell this turn. Instead, she flings a quick, sloppy elemental blast of fire at the monster and misses completely, setting a tree on fire. Emmer stabs up her with a sword and draws blood, which badly wounds this creature, but now it's angry and has an angry rat up in its face and the club swinging over the guy's head. The ogre misses. Len recovers from the surprise and lets loose an actual spell called the Coruscating Coffin. Bolts of energy shoot forth and blast the Etin, toppling it to the ground, smelling of burnt fat. Emmer dodges out of its way, having nearly been flattened twice. Emmer says, "Do you want to switch jobs?" And Len just grins. They return triumphantly to town the next morning with a pair of nasty Etin heads and a dirty sack. As they approach, they find dark smoke on the horizon. A squad of tired-looking knights traveling south meets them. Something has attacked the town, burning half of it. The ruler, Lady Lavinia, is operating out of an open-air tent as she tries to direct rebuilding and recovery. Much of the town is badly damaged. She tells Emmer and Len that, while she's impressed by the Etin killing, she has much bigger problems right now. She doesn't care too much about the treasure at the moment, but fears that the dragon will come back for more, either for looking for more loot or just to cause more killing and destruction. She wants the two of them to deal with this problem by not necessarily killing the dragon, because she's not confident they can do that by themselves, so much as figuring out where it is so that there can at least be some effort at a kill team. She offers a set of 3 healing potions immediately, and a promise of gold that she currently doesn't have. Many of the town's knights and guards are dead or wounded along with civilians, and they're all very busy, so Emmer and Len shrug and they agree to help how they can. Len starts out trying to offer healing in town because she is pretty good at that, but there isn't a lot of time to do that, and doesn't do terribly well at it. Meanwhile, Emmer tries to gather information, being the more social of the two. He finds himself trying to keep order and prevent any robbery of a good-hearted merchant who set up an improvised shop and shelter, supplying what he can. While doing that, he hears a couple of useful rumors. The livestock are gone too, for one thing, presumably eaten or carried away. Someone glimpsed a pack of winged fire-breathing monsters, not just one, so maybe it was not one dragon, but several creatures. Third, there's a drunken rogue sitting around complaining about the fact that he didn't get paid for some job he went on. He thinks that maybe the attack was really not by dragon at all, but by enemies of the ruling clan here. He's desperate for work, and he's short on money, so he offers to go along with these two. He's a human rogue who's got some lockpicking and sneaking skills, something that these two lack, so they hire him. He wants 20 silver and a share of the loot. His name is Elras Tarner. I'll base his stats on a rogue hireling from one of the other Worlds Without Number books. So, Emmer, Len, and the new hireling Elras head out to the west, the direction that the people think this dragon or other creatures may have flown. I rolled a random encounter, and then saw that the adventure I'm working with actually calls for one. They fail a notice check, so their first clue to the problem is a cackling, oversized dragon man suddenly looming over them. It seems that the flames missed a few fools who pry into our master's affairs. He actually gets a surprisingly good reaction roll, suggesting that he is less hostile than average. He's in a good mood or something. So I was wondering how to represent this guy in Worlds Without Number terms. The way he's written up in the original book is pretty dangerous, and I was actually intimidated about Ember and Len's chances against this guy. So for translation, I was trying to figure out what he would be equivalent to in Worlds Without Number terms. The lore says they're supposed to be individually very powerful, with sturdy scales and breath that can fell a lesser hero. The numbers for things like armor class and hit points don't really translate all that well, though, so I had to think about that. I thought about making him a predator hellbeast, according to the official rules, and figured that he could eat Emmer and Len pretty easily. However, the actual adventure description makes it sound like a small party might only be able to handle one, and gets overconfident about what you find when you're looting the body after killing him. And I think that these characters react a little differently to that. No. Emmer tries to look too weak to bother with, and play on this guy with social skills. He says, "We're being paid to go out here and look." "Paid? Obviously not enough." Yeah, obviously, says Emmer. "We're the best they could find on short notice." And he makes a convince roll and does okay. The dragon man, who's already in a good mood, laughs at them. "With that little sword, and what is that, a stick?" Len picks up on this theme Emmer is going for. She waves her staff around and says, "I can swing this pretty hard, you." It's easy for her to look terrified. And the monster decides, "You're not worth the effort," and flies back off to the west. Shaken, the duo and their new hireling try to observe the monster's flight as it goes back west. They get a pretty good notice check, and they can tell the general area that it's heading for is in the mountains to their west through forest. They spend another day traveling through the forest that's eerily quiet and foreboding, but they don't have any encounters. And they roll well for notice again, and they see smoke ahead, but this is campfires rather than a burned town. That may or may not be a good thing. The ratfolk and their human companion approach cautiously. Looks like a rickety wooden fort. Emmer says, "Why would we want to go in there again, considering there may be dragon men?" Len says, "What, don't you want to get butchered by dragon men?" "I think I'll pass," says Emmer. "Wait a moment," she says. "Let me read the box text here." "Oh, okay, this fort is right up against the mountains, guarding an entrance to the mines that we're looking for. That's convenient. It also looks like there's a cage of prisoners who are now being led into the mine by human soldiers. These captives are mystic kobolds, decent lizard people." The dragon creature, known as a Draconveer, went into the mine too, leaving a few soldiers behind. It looks like there are 4 soldiers here, 2 of them guarding the gate and 2 of them inside at a campfire. They're not really being stealthy at all. These are called imperators within the lore. Fortunately, that is something completely different than how that term is used in Worlds Without Number. These guys are described as tough soldiers with somewhat magic-resistant armor, but they're not really hero level. I will treat them as skilled veteran troops who get a save against magic when they normally wouldn't. The party tries to sneak up on the gate, and they get a not all that good roll, and can't risk getting very close to the front gate. Elvis complains, "You with the armor, you'll give us away." Instead, he climbs over the stockade and tries to get a sense of whether these guards are close enough they can all be hit with the same spell. I do some random odds here and said no, unfortunately. Len targets the gate guards with a spell called Wind of the Final Repose, really just a sleep spell. These men's magic-resistant armor gives them a save, when they normally wouldn't get one. One of them gets a little dizzy, and the other one falls asleep at his post, and Random Chance says no, he doesn't immediately fall over, he's just asleep on his feet. As planned, the party charges, and they win initiative, so a fight begins. Emma runs up and attacks the wakeful guard, but he can't get there in time to land a blow before the man is paying attention. The rogue fares better, chucking a knife at the alert guard for 3 hit points. Len then blasts him with fire. That guy has a total of 7 hit points left. The guard shouts "Intruders!" and the man beside him reacts by falling over, asleep. The two inside the stockade are now alerted, though. This guard swings a mace at the nearest enemy, which would be Emmer, and the rat ducks and counters, only to get parried and shoved back. Elvis sees an opening to drive another knife into the armored man's armpit for 4. Len comes closer to try to fight cautiously with her staff. I then check tactics for these enemies. Do the 2 other guards open up the gate to come out and fight? My cards say no, so they're just peeking over the stockade and grabbing rocks to throw. Len is terrible at regular melee combat, so what she does is a swarm attack, meaning she contributes to someone else's attack to give him an advantage. She teams up with Emmer for that. Emmer does very well anyway, and he gets a damage bonus from the swarm attack, and the guard is slain. Elvis retrieves his thrown knife and chucks it at one of the guards on the stockade who's trying to throw rocks at him, and completely whiffs. He's going to have trouble finding that thing again. 2 rocks whiz at the party, and they actually hit Len and Elvis, so there's a bit of a stalemate. The heroes are low on ranged attacks without using actual spells, and they have to either get over that stockade or somehow open it while the 2 guards are defending it. So the party tries to provoke the guards inside. Emmer holds up his shield to guard Len while Elvis starts looting the bodies. Elvis is really pretending to do that and focusing more on total defense. Emmer says, "Hey guys, we got 2 free sets of souvenir Imperator armor. These will look great on the trophy rack. I always thought these goons treated our kind badly." Len adds, "Oh yeah, what do you want to do to the bodies? Shall we maybe take some ears with us?" They roll a couple of rolls to provoke these guys, and that's good enough for the angry guards to rush to open the gate and kill these magic-using inhuman scum. Emmer is ready for them. He swings at the weaker-looking one while remaining near Len and cuts him down with a single blow. Len fires at the other with a blast of fire, doing 8 damage. Elvis hesitates, unable to actually get in a hit. The survivor's morale is unshaken, but he fails an instinct check, an interesting feature about making people react a little more humanly in battle. He is frozen in hesitation, it means he is unable to believe these 3 are clobbering him and his fellows, and that's when the fire blast kills him. I noted in passing that magic resistance armor they have really ought to include taking less damage from Len's elemental blasts, and I didn't really think of it at the time. The party does some quick looting, and they callously finish off the sleeping guard. Part of their motivation is that these guys are carrying signet rings, indicating that they are in league with the cult called the Black Rose. Emmer and Len have run into these people before, and they're pretty thoroughly evil. Len says, "Them again. They're more widespread than I thought." Emmer says, "And they're involved with this Draconvir guy. Are all the evil forces in the world actually cooperating?" From looting the bodies, they get a couple of healing potions and have a collection of maces and this slightly enchanted armor and other things. It's loose change. For now, they hand out some of the money, and they find that there are a lot of miscellaneous camp supplies here. There were meant to be more men here. So there could be a safe place to sleep tonight, but is it really worth risking somebody else showing up to the camp? A roll by Elvis suggests that they're pretty good at hiding the bodies and the evidence of violence here, but the camp will still look abandoned. So they get the bodies out of sight and scatter dirt over the blood and leave the gate locked, and otherwise avoid obvious signs of trouble. They peek into the mine and see a wide entryway built by the dwarves long ago. There are sounds of mining picks in use in the distant depths, and red glass lanterns line the walls. They take a quick rest and then enter the mine. They don't see anyone or anything so far but unused rusty tracks. There's a 5-way intersection ahead where they look around. A pair of those Imperator guards are on patrol, and the party manages to avoid them. One path has a clear sign that says, "Stay away," and they think that's good advice. There's a dark path to the right, and they creep down that. Here there's a musty wooden door behind which is heat and 2 human voices conversing casually, sleepily, like the guards are on break or something. Reluctantly, the party decides to try sneaking in there in hopes of capturing people. Erebus leads the way in sneaking. He does well, opens the door, and creeps in, realizing that there are 2 guards relaxing in an underground hot spring, without their armor. He beckons to his friends to come in after them and shut the door. These men are caught off guard without their weapons or armor, suddenly facing 3 attackers. Emmer hisses at them. "Talk! What are you doing here besides bathing?" The guards claim that they're not working here willingly. The Draconvir drafted them, and these guys are working for some yet more evil boss. Their group has enslaved some kobolds to dig for them and search for some kind of treasure in a deep cavern world beneath this area. They add that the local boss around here is down the central passage of the mine. Because there's some miscellaneous gear stored here like torches and rope, the party decides to tie these men up, make sure they're unarmed, and then barricade the door from outside. Len is okay at crafting, so she's the one who arranges that and does pretty well at that. And say, "See you, we'll come back in an hour or so to let you out." Next, the party tries another unexplored fork. They're heading towards the sound of the mining. And there's a trap to detect, and Len manages to do that. There are 6 kobolds who spot the party, and there's one red-scaled fellow who drops his pick and approaches with his hands out. "Thank the Nest Mother! Are you here to rescue us?" Emmer says, "We were sent to investigate a dragon attack. We're thinking it might have been the Draconvir, now that we've seen him." The kobolds hiss. "We're not their minions willingly. Please don't hurt us. My name is Bilgree, and if you'll let us go, we'll fight for you and for our freedom. There are many more of us enslaved deeper in the mine." And the ratfolk confer and say, "Well then, take up your picks again. We'll need them." There isn't much time to rest. The Draconvir overlords patrol sometimes, not just the Silver Arbor men. They decide they're going to eliminate the pair of Imperators who are patrolling up and down the main area. And due to some card checks, these guys seem to be heading out to the sunlight. So the group stalks them, following them back out of the mine. While the pair of guards are wondering where everybody is out of the camp, the ambush is sprung. Because there are 6 kobolds, they team up for a pair of 3-man swarm attacks that give them advantage to attack. They turn out to not actually do very well, but they do get guaranteed shock damage, meaning that a little bit of damage does leak through no matter what. Emmer runs up to strike, slams his target to the ground, and everybody else whiffs. That last guy is still alive, and he's surrounded by 9 foes now. And because he's not an idiot, he runs the heck away into the forest, and the party is okay with this. The group moves back into the mine, proceeding slowly. There is a room containing 3 cultists studying a set of books on stone pedestals, loomed over by the Draconvir Overlord, or one of his kind anyway. The adventure says there's not really a way around this, no way to proceed without walking into the encounter. So I was deciding to pick a stat block here that seemed a little bit more playable than the Predator Hellbeast. So I was thinking maybe the Hulking Predator stat block, which supposedly would be reasonably well balanced for this party, even though I was pretty skeptical about that. I decided I would treat the cultists with the Petty Mage stat block, without any actual spells, but using a once-a-day equivalent of the Elemental Blast ability, like Len has, and then going to knives as a backup weapon. So that was 1 Draconvir Overlord, a scary guy with a spear, and a lot of hit points, and 3 cultists. Time to even the odds. Orvis peeks into the room, and comes back and whispers, "We've got a problem," as he describes the situation. They all talk this over, and then make a plan. They're going to have the kobold Bilgree prostrate himself at the room's entrance and claim the kobolds have found something terrifying and they need help. Why, the Imperator guards are too scared to come here themselves. Bilgree makes a roll for this and does okay. And then I had to decide, based on a card draw, does the Overlord go for himself to investigate, or just send a scribe to deal with whatever this is? And the Draconvir says, "How did you even get here? Never mind. You idiots stay here. I'll deal with this myself." He enters the mine tunnels by himself, which gave him no room to fly, and he leaves for the mining area. The rest of the party is hiding just out of sight at the intersection. They make a stealth check. They know they haven't got a lot of time here before the Overlord goes to investigate, finds nothing, and then comes back suspicious. So the group hustles north while still trying to remain stealthy. Bilgree gets up, since he's already in the room with the cultists, and he walks to the back of the room, trying to create a distraction by irritating the cultists. "While the master is away, I wish to sing one of my favorite mining songs." The cultists are busy, they groan, and somebody chucks a rock at him. "Shut up, you idiot, he'll kill you for that." But the kobold starts singing, and it's really annoying. While he's doing that, the group sneaks up so as to sneak attack these guys. Emmer nails the strongest cultist immediately. The other people fail, but they still do a few points of shock damage total. And the battle begins in earnest with these cultists. They've been attacked from behind, and the main kobold group now swarms in to join the battle. They finish that very quickly, which leaves just the Draconvir to deal with very soon. They can barely move the bodies out of the way, and don't really have any time to get farther than this and investigate the doors on the walls. Not really knowing which way to go, they decide they've got to set up their ambush right here. Len has a potion of wrathful detonation, i.e. a magic grenade, and they share out a couple of healing potions. The Dragon Man comes back in shouting, "What is the meaning of this? Where is everyone?" His name is Ridley, I decided. He strides into the big room. He gets a wrathful detonation to the face. The grenade auto hits him for 8 points of damage. Immediately, Len then sets off a spell of her own, the Coruscating Coffin, which rolls pretty well and does a lot of damage to this guy, who fails to save for half. Emmer immediately leaps into battle too and slashes the guy, but doesn't do a whole lot of damage. It's a glancing blow. The kobolds can't really get up in his face this round, but I'll let them chuck rocks, and they don't really do anything. Now it's Ridley's turn. He's just been hit with a spell, a grenade, and a sword in a sudden ambush. He passes a morale check, however he also makes an instinct check, and he fails at that. Based on the table for hateful and sadistic sentience, I rolled attack the weakest looking foe. So Ridley does a tactically non-ideal thing, and he rips into the kobold squad. It's 2 attacks, which allow him to grab one kobold and slam him snout first into another, leaving both of them broken and bleeding on the floor. Len then blasts him with lightning. The bolt goes wide, though. Emmer barely manages to scratch him, but being a warrior, that still does substantial damage. Elrus nicks the guy, too. The kobolds have to make a morale roll at this point from all that carnage, and they fail, which makes them cower and flee. Ridley is angry and pained. He tries to rip and tear into Len. He hits easily, but Emmer attempts to redirect the damage. He rolls twice to screen ally, and he does very well, defeats Ridley at this, which means that he takes both hits. Where Len would have been ripped apart by these attacks, he just takes a ton of damage, 14 out of 16 hit points. A frightened Len dives behind cover and launches a blast of fire, missing wildly. Elrus slashes too, and does only a little bit of damage. Emmer shoves his sword deep into Ridley's chest for maximum damage, leaving him with only 3 hit points left. Staggered and bleeding heavily, Ridley gapes at the little creatures that have beat the hell out of him in the last few seconds. "You! All of you will die at my hands, someday soon!" And then he turns and flees for his life. Len rushes to attack him from behind with a last elemental blast, and she actually hits, and that kills him. Len finds herself with 2 dying kobolds, while Emmer collapses against a stone pillar, bleeding and with his armor ripped open. She says, "Hang on, please," and focuses on the kobolds. That is a couple of tricky healing rolls, but she manages to stabilize them. Then she runs over to Emmer, who is busily trying to get out a potion. She grabs it from his hands and applies it to him directly, which is a little irrational, but it does help heal him up. Passes over him, applying some mundane first aid and several kisses. That heals him in 2 applications, and she does some basic care to get the kobolds up on their feet, too. Everyone seems to be alive. Meanwhile, Elrus the Rogue has recovered and shaken off his shock from this battle, and he has opened up a room to the left, saying, "We shouldn't be in the open here. We can't stay much longer." The kobolds now are keeping guard. One of them says, "What's this big book here? Magic?" Len takes a look at it, but one of her weaknesses is that she doesn't really have any academic book learning. She can only really say this doesn't look magical, more like a map of the underground with a lot of notes on it. And one of these maps looks like it might represent this area here. Len can't make much more out of it right now, but the group is going to take some of these books along when they leave. Len's ears burn at the reminder of her lack of formal education. The lead kobold says, "We should continue on. Our friends are still in danger." Everyone else says, seriously, after that? They're still pretty hurt, despite the healing. They take a little time to look through the storerooms nearby, and they find some valuable silver bars, along with some silver-edged pikes and longswords, so that's nice anyway. Elrus says, "Our mage is spent, and our warrior's armor got ventilated. No way should we go any farther." So they argue a bit, but realize they're still not in any condition to save people right now, so they decide to stop for the night. Emmer grunts, saying, "I could use a trip to that hot spring, and 2 men need to be set free from that." Everyone else says, "Oh yeah, those guys." They can't easily move the big dead creature they just killed, but they do take his right hand and a few teeth as a trophy. They take along a couple of the books as well. So they head from there over back to that hot spring area where they captured those 2 guys. Random chance says they have not managed to escape. So the heroes reluctantly untie them and say, "We killed the Draconvir and some Black Rose cultists. If you're serving them against your will, well, now's a good time to leave." Gave them a reaction roll, and they reacted somewhat negatively. So they are surly due to their captivity and humiliation, and the party doesn't trust them either. So the plan is to keep those 2 guys captive for the moment and take them along outside of the mine. They're going to be allowed to rest outside, and the party will try to rest, but not actually in the camp, but just outside it. That way, if someone shows up in the night, the newcomers will not necessarily find the party. They waffle about this, not sure about balancing risk and reward, especially since Len points out that she needs to get a good night's sleep in order to get her spells back. So they're going to take the risk of actually staying in the camp, or at least Len and Emmer will with Elres, taking over one of the camp tents. The kobolds and the prisoners will hang out just outside the encampment. So this is a gamble about how dangerous they're going to get overnight, and the gamble failed. There was an encounter somewhere in the night. So I rolled to see just how big of a problem this was going to be and got a 6 on a 2d6 scale, so moderate threat. I said it was going to be 2 of the soldiers and 2 more of the cultists serving the Draconic Masters, but for now it's just 4 guys. The heroes are in a tent, and they've got somebody keeping watch, and they've got one of the kobolds hanging around near the front of the encampment to look for trouble. So they have enough time to get up. Emmer hurries to put on his armor, which is somewhat damaged, and I gave him a reduced AC for that, even though there's not really a specific mechanic for that. Len has not slept enough to get her spells back, and warns the others about that. Did a card draw at this point to figure out how these newcomers are behaving as they enter the camp, and got a phrase that says, "scientific data." So I'm thinking these are cultists who showed up to collect information, like hearing about how the current research project is going, what they were doing with the books. Those 4 enter the camp, and they find nobody seems to be there. The camp is abandoned, and they've got a bad feeling about this, rightly so. They call out, and a random die roll said they're going to draw their weapons and try to enter the mine. That's good news, because that means the party can stalk them as they go into the mine and try to attack them from behind. The party goes first and manages to take these guys down very quickly, getting rid of them. "Down with the Black Rose," say the kobolds. Elres guides everybody back to camp to actually get a good night's rest, Len in particular, and they actually manage to sleep. In the morning, they gear up again and enter the mine to finish the job. They leave their heavy stuff outside like most of the treasure. The kobolds warn that they know there are 2 big mean minions guarding the remaining kobold slaves. It definitely sounds like there's some mining going on down there. The picks ring out against the walls. The party also smells some overseers down there. They are stinky, and they are ogres in tight, spiky armor. It looks painful on them. I was trying to figure out how to represent these guys in the local rule system, and decided they would count as ogres, which are much weaker than their boss, the dragon guy, in raw hit points, but they would have a random special ability each. One of them is a Helmcracker, who does stunning damage, and the other one has Veteran's Luck, making him similar to the warrior ability. You can either force a hit or force a miss at one point, anytime in one battle. Len has 2 spells for the day, and she's worried that her sleep spell won't be able to affect them. She's actually wrong, but she doesn't know that. Out of character, I just didn't want to instantly end the battle, which might have happened. So, can the party win at a stealth check? There's noise in the party's favor due to the mining, so I gave them a bonus, and it didn't work. One of the ogres yells, "Fee, fi, fo, fum," and raises his heavy club, alerting the other guy. Regular initiative, and the heroes do get to go first, but not as an ambush. So Len lets fly with a coruscating coffin spell, doing a lot of damage on the weaker-looking ogre. The ogre, I gave a random chance to be just smart enough to realize that interrupting wizards is a good thing in this rule system, and he actually passed that. The ogre says, "Hey, no tricksy stuff," and chucks a rock at Len's face. This is a snap attack that can interrupt normal initiative, and he actually rolls a 20 on the attack roll, so he does 4 points of rude interruption damage to Len and ruins her spell. Emmer is so surprised that they thought to do that he didn't manage to block. He and the rest hold their actions until the ogres approach and then go into melee. The kobolds, meanwhile, shout at the other captives, "Come, brothers, help us!" And they start to run in. Emmer slashes the weaker ogre, doing a lot of damage, and Elres snipes the guy as well. The kobolds try to swarm the ogres, and they don't do very much, but do a little damage. The remaining slaves run up to try to help with their mining picks. That smarter, tougher ogre has already used up his action for the round by whacking Len. The wounded one bellows and manages to to whiff completely, but here the shock damage rule comes into play, and Emmer gets whacked pretty badly anyway with shock damage, 5 points from a follow-up kick that slams him into a wall. Len is rattled, but recovering. On their next turn, she angrily hurls fire at the tougher ogre and does a lot of damage while shouting, "Don't interrupt me!" However, that ogre has that Veteran's Luck ability, and that lets him negate one hit. I'm flavoring this as he rushes behind a pillar, and that does damage to the support structure for the mine. Len's attack, instead of doing any damage to the ogre, makes rocks fall. This was some range away from Len, so I tried to figure out who might actually be in danger by this, and rolled that it's Emmer's problem. He has to make an evasion save, and he fails that. So rocks fall, Emmer gets whacked by falling stones. But turnabout is fair play. If I'm allowed to have the ogre dodge magic with his Veteran's Luck, then Emmer is allowed to use his Veteran's Luck ability to negate this rockfall. He leaps out of the way and barely saves his tail. Elvis manages to kill the weaker ogre, but the stronger one tries to grab Len. Len has no real defense against this. The ogre is doing this as a snap attack, and he's obviously much stronger. Everyone rolls terrible on the relevant skill check, but the ogre is stronger, so I gave it to him. Len gets grabbed. This enrages Emmer, and he stabs the ogre. The kobolds manage to finish the beast off. Len crashes to the floor, bruised and shaken. With the ogres dead, the kobolds are free, and there is much rejoicing. The whole gang loots the nearby treasury, finding 1,000 silver pieces and several slightly enchanted pieces of gear and a few potions. Most of the stolen wealth of the treasury of Kettlesare is still missing, though, likely taken away by other Drakkenbyr that were here. During the battle, a chunk of wall collapsed, which revealed something the kobolds were searching for unwillingly, a new cavern entrance lit by blue crystals, leads somewhere deep into the caverns beneath the earth. The kobolds mutter, "So it was right there the whole time." Elvis says, Nope, we are not delving any deeper today, at least not with me." Emmer nods and dusts himself and Len off, saying, "Yes, let's get out of here." The party loads itself up with loot. The kobold slaves take everything they can carry, including a lot of spare arms and armor and miscellaneous supplies and food from the camp. They agree to let the actual adventurers keep the silver and magic stuff in return for an escort back to Kettlesare, where they will try to help rebuild. They travel back, and on the first day they run into something randomly. I got a reaction roll here that said this should be a neutral event, and a table told me something like cartwheel breaks or wagon overturns, and a sound or side effect of inhabitant activity. I had to figure out how to interpret that. So I said, the party has been lugging loot around. The kobolds are struggling to carry all the stuff they got, so they detour to a nearby village where Len hopes to buy food for the town and get rest in a cart. They explain the situation to the villagers and say, "Hey, there's a camp over there that is recently abandoned by the guys that we fought. You are welcome to go over there and loot anything that's not nailed down and bring it to Kettlesare, where they're eager for repair supplies and food. You should go over there." Emmer is the lead talker here, and he does pretty well with it. He pays a little money to hire a porter to come along, bringing spare food and other supplies. The party continues on back to Kettlesare. The city is still struggling to rebuild after the attack they suffered. They get an audience with Lady Alderbrand, drop off some relief supplies, and explain everything that happened. The kobolds offer to work, and they've got some weapons and armor to sell. The lady hasn't got cash to buy gear with right now, but she does work something out to get the kobolds around as hard workers and getting them established here. She says, "So, your group recovered some part of the treasure." The party is uncomfortable about that part, explaining what they found and who they had to kill to get it. They show off the dragon monster's trophy parts and emphasize the books they found. A scholar has a look at those and reports with some more useful information than Len was able to get. That guy says, "This looks like the cultists and the Drakkenbyr were trying to unearth an actual dragon down there." Lady says, "It seems that you've stopped them for now, and the main culprit is dead. We'll have to discuss further work on this problem with our allies. For now, at least, it sounds like we're no longer under an immediate threat, since there's no actual dragon in play, yet, anyway. I hope that you can stay for a few days to offer what help you can, and you can keep whatever you found down in the mines." Emmer bows and says, "We'll do what we can, lady." The party rests there for a few days. Len pays to get Emmer's armor repaired for him, and casts a couple of spells to help the townsfolk. Emmer helps the town with general labor and keeping the peace as a guard. Elvis the rogue wants to part ways, and he's eager to actually split up the treasure now. They've got a lot of stuff. They got 1,000 raw silver coins, they got 3 silver ingots, a couple of potions, and some lesser magic items, which weren't really specified. So they get a couple hundred coins each, and they each get 1 magic item, and a potion. And some renown, a resource that characters in this game can use to eventually change the world, such as building institutions or changing social status. Ta-da! That's the end of this adventure session. So what did I make of this? First of all, I was working with a setting that is different than the default one for Worlds Without Number. This setting here is more free with healing and other magic stuff than the default setting. That's not necessarily bad, but it does mean that a GM needs to think about the availability of magic items as something you can actually buy in the setting without too much trouble. And a +1 magic sword is not something you can sell and retire on. It's not something that costs like 10,000 silver pieces. It's something you can just buy. So that's a different mindset, and a GM will have to adapt to that. As for the difficulty, I was surprised by the small party's ability to defeat a 10-hit die beast. I thought they were going to get killed. This game has a calculation for estimating battle difficulty that suggested that it was doable, and the dice did mostly favor the heroes after they used some tactics to get rid of the minions and make sure that they won the initiative. A GM would need to consider combat balance based on how often the party is going to chuck grenades on round 1, like this group did. Worlds Without Number in general doesn't care about balance, in the sense that adventures should always be fair for the current PC power level. That's not really part of how Worlds Without Number is normally built. So there's a clash of mindsets here between the D&D assumptions that everything is supposed to be balanced for your party, and the Worlds Without Number assumption that you might run into something far too dangerous for you. You can see I was kind of struggling with that when they first ran into the Dragon Men, and they were very eager not to fight. That also means then that when you design adventures for this setting and this system, you should try to make sure there's a way to handle it without necessarily killing your way past everything, because just saying that you absolutely must fight here is going to be almost a death sentence for your party. As for adapting the monsters to Worlds Without Number type statistics, I think that went pretty well. Reskinning things to be one of the standard templates for a hulking predator or something worked pretty well. I winged it a bit and gave people special abilities. In hindsight, I probably should have nerfed the elemental blast damage against those guards because of their anti-magic armor. And I probably should have given some kind of area effect attack to the dragon guy because he's supposed to have fire breath, and I didn't model that. I kind of assumed that the rule of spells uber alles would apply here, in that one spell can often heavily change an encounter or even end it in one shot. I didn't fully take into account that idea of enemies being smart enough to interrupt you with a thrown weapon, though. Normally the way that Emmer and Len would operate is for Emmer to serve as a bodyguard to block anything that would hit Len and interrupt her spells. But that didn't happen in this case, so Len got interrupted, so her spell was useless. And it's interesting to see that play out. It means that he's very important as a bodyguard, and he got his chance to shine by not only doing a ton of damage, and doing automatic damage even, but being able to make sure that the squishy wizard doesn't get flattened in every round. This was a pretty straightforward dungeon crawl type adventure, so it was mostly focused on combat, and I didn't do a lot of skill checks or roleplay here. That was okay this time, and a lot of what I was doing was just seeing how well I could adapt the rules and setting, which I think worked out pretty well. I did enjoy the idea of paying attention to how the party rests and recovers while risking random encounters. There was a gamble in exactly where they were going to rest and how, and I enjoyed looking at that. Where I would want to go from here is a job to deal with some kind of small problem in the town of Kettlesare before heading back to the hero's home. Instead of going on another dungeon run to slay a dragon, following up the obvious action hero part, I'd want them to deal with something about problems in the city other than high adventure for a little while, and look at the effects of Len expanding the underground alley district, because she has spells that are specifically very good for that. That does not mean I want to do an adventure about running a coffee shop. That's kind of lame and stupid. But it does mean possibly getting through a whole session where they don't kill anyone. So I'd want to see some skill checks, some role play, even starting to get into a faction play where there's this underground district and it's expanding in power, and that has some kind of interesting effect. Fortunately, both these characters are not simply combat robots. They've got skills other than combat stuff. Emmer is a talker with some surprisingly good social skill, and Len is a crafter who also has medical training. Both of them are part of a social structure where they have friends and enemies, and they fit into the setting rather than purely being murder hobos. So I would like to explore that a bit more and do more with making this a living setting for these characters as opposed to just plain generic adventure. This setting is detailed enough that I could do that. I could have them fit into the world better. By which I mean that some adventures will come out of the consequences of their actions and not just be somebody walking up to them and saying, "Here, I have another quest for you." Similar to what I do when I write stories, I like to have the heroes be the ones who are proactive and trying to accomplish something rather than having a quest dropped on them. What else is there to say? I had fun with this, and I could see doing more with this setting. I enjoy the rule system, and I think I've got a reasonable handle on it now, even though I'm sure there's more to learn. I'm not doing everything quite right. And this setting is distinct from the default setting of Worlds Without Number, and I think the system works well with this setting anyway. So I enjoy this, and I'd like to do more with it. If you are interested in Worlds Without Number, you can find the rule system for free, along with a paid version that has some more content. If you are interested in Chronicles of Aeres as a setting, you can find that also not free, but pretty cheap, and several books available for that to support the setting in different ways. Hope you check them out. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.